I'm recording these. Also, I want to tell you guys, I'm recording all of my classes so that I can start to put a library together that you guys can access then whenever you want. But I got to get some more classes recorded before I can get that set up. And I'm still learning how because I'm not very techy. Anyway, welcome. Happy Monday to everybody. When you are ready, just start to find a comfortable seat. My intention for this evening's class is Santosha. Santosha is contentment. It is one of the 8 limbs of yoga, which is part of the Yoga Sutras written by Patanjali. It's a yoga philosophy, which I absolutely love. It's where obviously kind of the idea of yoga, the practice of yoga stems from. And it's all about the mind actually, and not so much about the physical poses that we do. But I really feel in like this tech world that we're living in and with the stress that we're all feeling, we need the physical practice just as much as we need the mental practice. So the practice of Santosha is contentment, which I think it can be a very difficult thing to find sometimes, especially in these chaotic times that we're in. And that could be just contentment with your situation that you're in right in that moment. It can be contentment within your family, within your relationships, and contentment within yourself. A lot of times we can get discontent with our own self internally. So with that being said, the mudra for tonight is for contentment. And you're going to take your hands if you wish to participate in the mudra, and you're going to bring the tips of your 4 fingers together and your thumbs are going to face up. So you're kind of creating a bowl, a little bit of a, and there's space between the fingers, if you can see very well. And just let that rest, just maybe somewhere in front of your belly, wherever you're comfortable. And now take a few moments to start to settle in. Start to find your sit bones. Maybe just take a couple big breaths. You know, you made it to the end of the day. Start to, I don't know what word I'm looking for, like just kind of start to cast the day off. Conversations that you had, things that bothered you, things that came up for you, and just close your eyes and settle in. Contentment, or Santosha, refers to the ability to remain centered and at peace within your own being, no matter what is happening in your surroundings. When we cultivate Santosha, we learn to remain balanced in the midst of life's ever-present changes and opportunities. Never getting too low when things don't go as planned, or too elated when things go well. So it's like a balance. And as you continue to settle in and arrive into your space, maybe take a moment to set your intention. Talked about that last week. Maybe finding your focus point, your drishti, your breath, whatever it is that you want to use as your mind starts to drift off and those thoughts start to creep back in. You have that focus point, that intention to draw yourself back to over and over and over again. That's the practice. Maybe just take 1 or 2 more breaths, kind of right where you are. If you want to separate the hands, place the hands on the knees. Just come into the idea of starting to prepare for a little bit of movement, a little warm up. We'll start with some neck circles. So just let the chin come down to the chest and pause there for a moment. And as the chin is there, want you to kind of draw the shoulder blades together just slightly, and then make sure that the collarbones are relaxed away from the ears, letting that tension go. And maybe even notice it's so subtle when you draw the shoulder blades together ever so slightly, you find a little bit of expansion there across the top of the chest. And let's just start to the right, nice and slow. And as you come into this movement, kind of bringing your awareness into the shoulders, the neck area. Noticing any tension or stress or cracking or popping that seems to come up. If you find that you hit a little sweet spot and you want to linger there for a moment, you can. And then eventually pause and take these slow circles now to the left. There's so much stress that can build up in our throats and our necks and the tops of our shoulders. It's a kind of congestion, a narrowing, a bottleneck between the head and the heart and the stomach. There's a lot of emotion going on there. And then eventually just let the head kind of end up back in neutral. Check back in with your posture. You can continue to keep the eyes closed if you wish. Just one less distraction, pratyahara, just withdrawing the senses. And let's inhale, lift the chin, open the chest, nice and exaggerated. Pull the shoulder blades together, sit up nice and tall. Feel that all the way through the spine. And then exhale, kind of dramatically round through, pull the chin to the chest. And now alternate between the two, a seated cat-cow. Alternating between flexion and extension. And then just as you did in your neck, same thing. Bring the awareness now into the chest and the back, and the spine. And then sending a breath to any areas that kind of speak to you. That feeling you just need a little bit of attention. And then next time your chin comes to the chest, use the breath to bring yourself right back up to neutral, inhaling up nice and tall, and then take a little spinal twist to the right. Just for a moment, you can use your hands for a little bit of leverage, but I don't want you to go too deep. Just find your range of motion. And then come through center, and then go ahead and twist over to the left. And then just as we do in cat-cow, and I often do, is I'm going to send you off just to find your own pace. And then eventually, when you feel like your balance on each side, come back to center. I got one more stretch we're going to do before we get started. So bring your right hand to the floor beside you. And then we're just going to inhale that left arm up, reach up and over, find a nice long side stretch. And then kind of windmill the hands around and then take that over to the other side. And let's just go one more time on each side. While we finish up here, I just want to share with you that we have longer holds, less poses this evening. Focus of the practice, as I mentioned, is on santosha or contentment. So 5 minutes average, if time works out well, on each pose. So that's a long time. That can be a long time. A lot can happen in those 5 minutes. So let your awareness really come into the body and really think about the sensations that come up and try to recognize whether those sensations are your body opening and your fascia and your joints and you're kind of settling in and going deeper, or whether it's really starting to get to a place of big discomfort. And if it is, I want you to just come out of it. You can lay on your belly or your back. We're going to start in quarter child's pose. We've done this one before. It brings in the heart meridian. So you are going to come into child's pose, and what you do with your knees is up to you. If this is a little too strong for 5 minutes, then I want you to come onto your back and we'll take a variation. But otherwise, when you come onto your knees, maybe even shift side to side a little bit, just to kind of work in the hips. And that's whether the legs are close together or whether they're far apart. And then you're going to start to extend the fingertips towards the top of the mat. Arms are going to reach long. Forehead comes down towards the mat, ears between the biceps. If you need a blanket underneath the forehead for a little bit of support, you can do that. And then your left arm is going to stay lengthened, and there's going to be a bend in the right arm. That's quarter dog. You can even rest your forehead on the forearm of the right arm. And then just start to settle in there. And finding the breath, always remembering, I know I remind you a lot, but the mind can interrupt a lot. You have that intention, you have that focus point to come back to when your mind starts to wander. Yin, even with all of its sensations, which, as you know, there's a lot of them, it's a good place to kind of practice meditation, because you're in stillness, you're there, your mind's wandering, your mind's thinking about things. Just draw it back every time, over and over again. And if you want to say to yourself, well, I can't meditate, my mind's too busy. Well, everybody's is. It's meditation is a practice, just like our physical practice. It just, you got a lot of mental habits to change to get there, and it takes a lot of work, but it's highly beneficial. Just finding the breath, staying right where you are. You're just going to switch arms. So go ahead and extend that right arm out long, fingertips towards up the mat, and then put a bend in that left arm. The practice of contentment, the practice of santosha, it also brings our awareness right to where we are in that moment, and finding contentment within that moment also breeds gratitude, which can immediately, well, maybe not sometimes immediately, depending on what's going on, but can most of the time change your mood. It can change your heart rate, it can change your mood, it can change your energy. And when you do that, then you just are in a better place, and you can continue to stay in a better place. We waste a lot of time with ourselves being discontent, or letting our thoughts of discontentment rule over us. just as I had you do before. Find the breath, prepare for movement, and then start to extend those left fingertips up to the top of the mat. Now engage both arms so they become active and really reach the fingertips, press into the tailbone. And notice that length that should be developing from the tips of the fingers to the tailbone, nice and long. And then start to slide those palms underneath the shoulders. We're going to press ourselves up to tabletop. Now take a couple of rounds of traditional cat-cow in tabletop. So just as I had you do in the seated form, just notice. Just bringing our attention internally into the body. And then from here, I'm going to give you just a moment or two of some free movement. So you can continue in your tabletop if you wish. If you want to shift the hips forward and come into seal pose, you can, and then alternate back to child's pose. That's a nice stretch, especially if you do a lot of sitting during the day, or tuck the toes, lift the hips, come into down dog. Maybe pedal the feet out, and you can ripple through down dog into high plank if you want, alternating between those two. Whatever you do, just try not to create too much heat. Move softly and slowly, just focusing on the stretch. And then no rush to get there, but eventually just kind of find your way back to that tabletop. Walk the palms forward just a little bit and then start to release the hips down to the mat and then the belly and then the chest, and find your way into Sphinx Pose. So opening up the heart. So take a moment here. Most of you know the little adjustments. You can even bring the feet wide if you wish, if that's a little bit more comfortable. The elbows are underneath the shoulders. And the higher you lift the chin, as you know, the more sensation that will develop in the low back. So if you need to soften that, if you have low back issues, lower the chin a little. Just be mindful where you end up. Two things. One, once you settle in, consciously relax the glute muscles in the legs. And then secondly, pay attention to where you are in your shoulders. If you really started to dump, kind of pull the shoulder blades or create space between the shoulder blades, and then let the shoulders relax away from the ears. So the chest is nice and open there. And then maybe soften the gaze. Come back to the breath, back to your intention. One more nice big inhale where you are. And then as you exhale, bring the palms underneath the shoulders and tuck the elbows into the rib cage, and then bring the chin down towards the mat. And then let's just take a couple rounds of baby cobra. So inhale, lift the chin, open the chest, pull those shoulder blades together. Exhale, release down. One more time. Inhale, open. Exhale, release. Now we're going to make our way into Pigeon Pose, or Swan Pose as it's called in Yin. Press yourself up to your tabletop. Now, if the thought of being here for several minutes is super not appealing to you, especially if you have any knee issues, I'm going to have you come onto your back. You're going to take figure 4, which is the variation to that. You're going to come into the traditional version of Swan or Pigeon. From your tabletop, you're going to bring your right knee up towards the right wrist, angle the right toes over to the side, and then slowly kind of walk that left knee back, opening up the hips. Take a quick peek over that right shoulder. Make sure that that heel is facing up. And then you can slowly come down onto your forearms, onto a blanket, onto a bolster. If you are taking figure 4, you're going to move yourself around, coming onto your back. Always adjusting the hips first and the spine. And then you're going to pick that right ankle up and cross it onto that left knee. You can stay here. This is same form, same stretch, just a little softer, or you can pick that figure 4 up. That's going to make it a little bit deeper. If you have your chest facing down towards your mat and you're finding that there's a lot of space that between that right hip and the floor, you can stuff a blanket in there for a little bit of support as well if you need to. Bring your attention back first to your focus point. If you're on your back, I'm going to have you stay there for just a moment. If you want to release the bind and just set the left foot down, you can. But for those of you like I said, whose chest is facing down, the traditional version. Start to bring the palms underneath the shoulders and then gently press the chest, the chin up. Pause for a moment. And then start to, I use my back toes, kind of bring the hips up out of that opening and then bring the right knee back to meet the left, landing back in your tabletop. Now, option here again to take seal, open up the hips, or if you want to come into, tuck the toes, come into down dog, you can pick the right leg up and put a bend in the knee and take scorpion pose for a minute. For anything else that comes up that feels good to you. You're on your back, you're going to uncross that right foot, set that on the mat, and then extend both legs out long and bring the arms up overhead. Take a full body stretch for a moment. Just linger there for a second. Those of you that took movement, coming back into traditional swan pose on the left side, come back to your tabletop. You're going to bring that left knee to the left wrist this time, right toes angle over to the right side of the mat, and then slowly start to open the hips. Remember to peek now over that right shoulder, check in, make sure that leg is straight behind you and your heel is up, and then slowly lower down onto the forearms or onto the chest. And then start to allow your body to soften into that left hip and that left side. And if you're on your back, you're just going to come into the opposite. Use the left ankle on the left knee, taking that figure four. Again, the option are to keep the foot on the floor or pick the figure four up, taking the body behind the leg. I think yin pairs very well with the practice of santosha, with the practice of finding contentment. I know some of the poses are a little stronger, so it might be hard to kind of settle into contentment, but you know, the working of the joints, the working of the fascia, the opening of the meridian lines, of the energy lines, you know, all know how good you can feel after class, and you can use that good feeling, that good place that you're in to practice contentment, which, as I mentioned, can then lead to gratitude. And then that puts you in a good place to set an intention. And then hopefully you take that out and you spread all that energy around to others. Beginning to deepen the breath again. If you're on your back, just release the bind, but don't uncross the legs. Just let the right foot come down onto the mats. And if you're belly facing down, start to slide the palms again underneath the shoulders. Slowly press yourself up, lifting the chin, pausing for a moment, and then starting to transition out of the hips. And then just find whatever movement you did on the right, go ahead and take that movement on the left so that then you're creating some balance. If you're on your back, go ahead and uncross the legs. Maybe extend them long, come back into that full body stretch that I had you do previously, or maybe even draw both knees into the chest if you want to release a little bit in the low back. So just take the next maybe 15, 20 seconds just to find a little movement, little stretch that feels good. And then when you're ready, I'm going to have you come onto a seat and grab a blanket. And we are going to come into, it's a little variation. If I've taught this, it's been a long time since I taught it. It's fish pose for the chest and the torso, and it's bound angle pose for the feet. So you're going to take a blanket, or if you know that you really like a lot of opening in the chest, and you have blocks, you can use them. So if you're using blocks, you're going to place one lengthwise kind of between the shoulder blades. If you really like that opening, as you come back, you can let the head fall back to the mat. But if that's a little too strong, you can use a second block for support. Otherwise, bring a blanket behind you. And the goal is to land on the blanket so that it's down a little bit. It's not quite at the bottom of the shoulder blades, but it's definitely not near the top. So that when you recline back, the tops of the shoulders actually kind of hang off the support, and maybe they don't touch the mat, but they're definitely opening towards the mat. And then you might even find that you kind of want to pick up the arms, put a bend in the elbow, and then slide the elbows and the shoulder blades down. That's going to create a little bit more opening across that chest. Starting with the knees bent, the feet flat on the mat. Just start to widen the knees to the side, and then as you do, walk the soles of the feet together till they meet. So hopefully you got a lot of expansion happening through the chest. The sternum is nice and open, shoulders are relaxed. And then start to relax into the thighs, start to let the hips open. If it's a little too strong in the hips, at some point you can slide support underneath the knees. And then when you feel situated in the pose, maybe take a deep breath. And then just try to allow everything to soften. Hopefully the spine will start to kind of mold over that blanket and that nice open position that it's in. Just continuing with the breath.
Starting to draw your thoughts, your focus back into your body. And then when you feel ready, very slowly, just start to bring those knees back up towards the ceiling. Lots of sensation in those hips. So start by kind of moving the feet out towards the edges of the mat, and then let the knees rest towards each other. And then when you feel ready, just you widen the knees a little, bring the feet a little closer together, and then roll to one side or the other, just enough so that you can remove whatever support it was that you had behind you. You can come back down onto your back. You're going to need that support. If you used a blanket and you opened it up, you're gonna kind of fold it back up into a square. You might use blocks. We're going to now bring the focus into the hip flexors, which is the front of the hips. Let's do one thing here though, before we head into that next pose. I want you to first, check in with the hips, make sure that the hips are in line with the shoulders, make sure that the chin is tucked a little so the back of the neck is long, and then let's bring both knees into the chest. Just take a nice soft squeeze, not creating too much compression in the hips. We've already done that. Maybe take a little rocking motion on the back. And then go ahead and start to take that momentum away. Release the feet to the mat with the knees bent. And then we're going to press into the feet, lift the hips up, and you're going to slide a support underneath your hips, kind of like we're coming into bridge pose, which we will after this. And then sit your pelvis back down, check back in again with that neck. Make sure it's long, make sure you didn't kind of creep the shoulders up or adjust the neck so that there's tension there, and then extend both legs out long. This particular pose, like I said, especially if you've elevated your hips a little bit higher, if you've used a bigger support underneath your hips or underneath your pelvis, this can become a lot after a few minutes. So if that tends to be the case and you're finding that it's just too uncomfortable, then put a little bend in the knees and just soften that just a little bit, and then maybe you can extend the legs back out. But the focus here is the front of those hips, and we're kind of exaggerating it because we spend so much time with our hip flexors bent. We need to straighten them out. We don't think about them a lot, but we need them. We need them to walk. And then just to remind you, if you find your mind drifting away, just draw it back. Maybe even laugh at yourself a little bit for whatever it was that you started thinking about. And then just come back to the breath, back to the pose and the mat. Before you start to find any movement, just take a deep breath where you are. And then just as softly as we came out of the hips when they were in butterfly pose, to come out of the hips just as softly coming out of this pose. So just start to bend one knee, let the sole of the foot land on the mat, and bend the other knee. So now you are in bridge pose, and let's just go ahead and stay there for a moment. I'm going to have you bring your arms up overhead or put a bend in the elbows and come into like goalpost arms or cactus arms. Just take a little opening in the shoulders while we're here, while we let the hips come out of that stretch. I'm going to go ahead and start to bring the arms back down by the side. To press into the feet, lift the hips up. Let's remove the support from underneath the pelvis and then let the pelvis fall back to the mat. And let's bring the knees back into the chest again. And maybe while you're here, take a moment and move into the ankles and the feet, toes. Move around that synovial fluid in those joints. And then eventually just settle off into a little bit of stillness. Let's put the feet back on the mat, and we are going to come into spinal twist, reclined spinal twist. Starting on the left side, so shift the hips slightly to the right, and then let the knees fall over to the left. You should have that blanket or blocks or support handy if you need to place something between the knees to soften that a little bit. And then let that right shoulder come back. Make sure it's softened into the mat. And then let's draw that right arm up overhead, opening up that right shoulder again. Maybe even let the chin fall to the right. And then close the eyes and then think about the torso. See if you can relax the belly, relax the chest. Maybe you'll notice that right shoulder blade soften a little bit more towards the mat. And then try to let the legs relax if they're not already. And as that happens, you'll just maybe start to notice that stretch, that twist in the spine, just ever so subtly start to deepen. Finding the breath and letting the attention go to the chin, and then start to bring the chin back up towards the ceiling. And then the right arm is going to come back down by the side, and we're going to transition the knees right from the left over to the right. So even if you have a blocker or blanket between the knees, keep it there and just bring it with you. So shift the knees up towards the ceiling, press into the feet, slide the hips over to the left, and then let the knees fall over to the right. And once you start to soften and you feel that left shoulder blade come back towards the mat, bring that left arm up overhead, and then the chin turns to the left. Finding the breath and then finding the chin. Chin comes back to neutral, arm comes back down by the side, and then knees start to come back up towards the ceiling. Adjusting the hips, bringing them back into alignment. And then let's extend the arms out to the side, coming into a T. And the legs will extend long, and then slide the feet all the way off the mat, landing in Pinnacle Pose. So opening everything up. Letting all that chi, all that prana, all that life force, blood flow, whatever it is to you. Just opening all of that up. And then just taking a breath just for a moment and finding contentment. Just right where you are in this space. And then starting to think about how you want to close your class, close your practice, how you want to take your Shavasana. Then you can start to make your way there. And then when you get there, as I ask you to, always take that deep cleansing, clearing breath. And then as you exhale, relax back into contentment again. Maybe if we practice finding contentment in the places we're most comfortable, it'll be easier for us to find contentment in the places that aren't. And allow yourself to relax, knowing that I will be here to bring you back when it's time.
Just very slowly drawing your awareness back. Taking the next breath or so to just recognize how you feel in this place of stillness. Maybe taking a moment of gratitude for that. Gratitude for your practice, gratitude for yourself. I thank you and have gratitude always for you sharing your practice with me, allowing me to guide you through that. Life is a gift. We may not always like the comings and goings of it, but those comings and goings, those ups and downs are what make up our lives. So I hope you can find the practice of Santosha. You know, the love, the light, the truth, and the beauty within each of you, because it is also within me. I hope you have a wonderful evening. Namaste. Thank you, everybody. You all have a very good night.